The Dark Secrets of the Mitchell Family. A dead man's notebook unveils a web of lies. The late morning sun streamed through the tall, arched windows of the Mitchell family's brownstone in Beacon Hill. A Boston fern, its deep green leaves spilling gracefully over its ornate stand, stood like a silent sentinel of the room's legacy. The fern was older than anyone in the house, minus 150 years of Mitchell family tradition nourished in its soil. Catherine Kate Mitchell sat at the long mahogany dining table, her posture poised and elegant, her navy cashmere dress tailored to perfection. She had spent years cultivating this composure, a necessity in her line of work as a senior analyst at one of Boston's top investment firms. Her eyes wandered over the table, laden with crystal glasses, fine china, and a centerpiece of fresh peonies. Everything in this house spoke of tradition, wealth, and a deliberate sense of superiority. Kate, Patricia Mitchell's voice cut through the soft hum of conversation. "Did you make this quiche yourself?" Patricia, Kate's mother-in-law, sat at the head of the table. Her tweed jacket and pearls epitomized the pinnacle of Boston's old money society. She held a silver dessert fork delicately between her manicured fingers, lifting a small piece of quiche to her lips with a subtle, sarcastic smile. "Yes," Kate replied, her voice even though she felt her stomach twist. "I used Julia Child's recipe. I heard she once lived here in Beacon Hill as well." Patricia's smile widened, but there was no warmth in it. "Ah, Julia. A name everyone knows. Her French recipes are delightful, though I suppose mastering them requires a certain finesse." Robert, Kate's husband, cleared his throat. Sitting beside her, he ran a hand through his graying hair, a gesture Kate had come to recognize as his silent plea for peace. "The quiche is excellent, Kate," he said, offering her a quick, apologetic smile. Across the table, Emily, Robert's younger sister, chimed in with her usual cheerful tone. "Kate, would you help me with my wedding preparations? We're planning the ceremony at the cathedral and the reception at the Four Seasons." Kate turned to Emily, grateful for the change in conversation. Emily, a brilliant pediatrician, had always been an ally in the family, a rare beacon of warmth in the otherwise frosty Mitchell household. "Of course, Emily. Anything I can do to help," Kate replied. Before Emily could respond, Patricia set her teacup down with a deliberate clink. "But dear," she said, her voice soft yet cutting, "Kate isn't exactly familiar with high society etiquette, is she? Our traditional style might be a bit overwhelming for her." A tense silence settled over the room. Kate felt her cheeks flush but maintained her composure. She reached for her teacup, her hand steady despite the sting of Patricia's words. "Mother," Emily said quietly, her tone firm, "Kate is my sister-in-law. She's family. And her taste is impeccable. Everyone praised her speech at the charity gala last month." Patricia's smile remained fixed, but her eyes were cold. "Of course," she said smoothly. "It's just that Mitchell family traditions must be preserved, especially for an occasion as important as Emily's wedding. After all, the eyes of Boston will be on us." Kate took a sip of her tea, straightened her back, and forced a polite smile. It was moments like this that reminded her how different she was from the Mitchells. Coming from a modest, middle-class family, she had worked tirelessly to earn her place at the table, both figuratively and literally. But no matter how perfect her manners or how polished her appearance, she knew she would always be seen as an outsider. Outside the window, the Boston cityscape stretched beneath a crisp autumn sky. To the untrained eye, everything in the Mitchell household appeared flawless. The glimmering silverware, the fresh flowers, the laughter drifting from the dining room. But beneath the surface, cracks were silently spreading, cracks that no amount of polish could hide. The final weeks leading up to Emily's wedding were a whirlwind of activity, filled with fittings, tastings, and endless discussions about the guest list. For Kate, the events were equal parts exhausting and isolating. It was early afternoon when she found herself standing in the sunlit interior of Ellen Espasa, Boston's most exclusive bridal salon. The air was perfumed with the faint scent of white lilies, and the walls were lined with rows of gowns shimmering with delicate beadwork and lace. Emily stood on the raised platform in front of the floor-length mirror, her silk organza gown billowing like a cloud. "You look stunning," Kate said sincerely. Emily turned, her eyes sparkling. "Do I really? I've been dreaming of this moment forever." "You're perfect," Kate reassured her. Patricia, seated in a plush chair nearby, dabbed her eyes with a monogrammed handkerchief. "She looks like an angel," she murmured, her voice thick with emotion. "It reminds me of Sarah's wedding dress." The mention of Sarah, Robert's first wife, hung heavily in the air. Kate glanced at the photograph on the mantel in the Mitchell family's brownstone, often enough to know Sarah's face by heart. Blonde, graceful, the very image of what Patricia considered ideal. Kate stepped back, giving Emily the spotlight. She had grown accustomed to shrinking into the background during family moments like this. "Kate, could you take a picture?" Emily's cheerful voice cut through her thoughts. Kate reached for her phone, but Patricia quickly intervened. "Oh, I'll take it," she said smoothly. "This will be an important family keepsake." Kate froze. Patricia's words stung more than she wanted to admit. The implication was clear. This was a moment for the real family, and Kate, no matter how hard she tried, wasn't quite part of it. Smiling tightly, Kate reached into her bag and retrieved a business card. "I can recommend a photographer," she offered. "He's handled several corporate events at the bank. His portfolio is exceptional." Emily's face lit up. "That sounds wonderful, Kate. Let's book him." But Patricia's expression darkened. "We already have a traditional photographer," she said, her tone firm. "He's captured every Mitchell family wedding for decades." Emily turned to her mother, her voice gentle but resolute. "Mother, I've seen Kate's photographer's work. It's beautiful. I'd like to use him." For a moment, Patricia's mask of elegance faltered. "Well," she said, her voice strained, "do as you please. But choices that disregard tradition often come with their own consequences." Kate said nothing, though the warning in Patricia's words was unmistakable. She had learned long ago that confrontation was futile. Instead, she stepped back and quietly observed as Emily admired her gown, the sunlight catching the intricate beading. The rehearsal dinner at the Four Seasons was as grand as the Mitchells themselves. The private dining room, with its crystal chandeliers and white damask tablecloths, exuded understated opulence. Kate arrived early, dressed in a navy channel suit, and took her seat near the center of the room. Jessica, the wedding planner, was making final adjustments to the seating chart when Emily suddenly called out, "Wait, where's Kate's name? She's not listed at the family table." Jessica looked flustered, glancing nervously at Patricia. "Oh," Patricia said lightly, "that must be a mistake." But at this point making changes would be difficult, wouldn't it? Kate felt a familiar heat rise to her cheeks. "It's fine," she said quickly, standing. "I don't mind sitting elsewhere." Robert, who had been silent for most of the evening, suddenly stood as well. "No, it's not fine," he said, his voice firm. "Kate is my wife. She belongs at the family table." The room fell silent. All eyes turned to Patricia, whose smile had disappeared entirely. "Mother," Robert continued, his tone sharper than Kate had ever heard, "this is unacceptable." Patricia's eyes narrowed, but before she could respond, Emily spoke up. "Kate has done nothing but support me through this entire process. She deserves to be here." The tension in the room was palpable. Kate wanted nothing more than to disappear, but Robert reached for her hand and gave it a reassuring squeeze. "Thank you," she whispered. Patricia said nothing, her lips pressed into a thin line. The rest of the evening passed in awkward silence, but for the first time, Kate felt a glimmer of hope. Robert, it seemed, was finally ready to stand by her side. The morning of Emily's wedding dawned with a hazy golden light filtering through the Boston skyline. The Mitchells' stately brownstone was bustling with activity. Stylists, florists, and planners darted about, their movements synchronized like a well-rehearsed symphony. Kate, dressed in a pale silver gown that complemented her dark hair, had been assigned the task of ensuring the bridesmaids were ready on time. She worked diligently, checking off lists, pinning last-minute adjustments to dresses, and offering tissues when emotions threatened to overwhelm the group. "Kate," Emily called from across the room, her voice light and cheerful, "can you help me with my veil?" Kate hurried over, her heels clicking softly against the hardwood floor. Emily was radiant in her gown, her dark curls swept into an elegant updo. Kate carefully arranged the veil, its delicate lace shimmering under the soft lighting. "You look beautiful," Kate whispered. Emily smiled warmly. "Thank you, Kate, for everything." Before Kate could respond, Patricia entered the room, her presence as commanding as ever. She was impeccably dressed in a deep emerald gown, her hair styled in soft waves. She surveyed the room with a critical eye, her gaze briefly landing on Kate before moving on. "Emily, darling, the car is ready," Patricia announced. As Emily gathered her bouquet, Kate stepped back, letting the mother-daughter moment unfold. But as Patricia helped Emily adjust her train, she glanced at Kate and said, "You'll ride in the second car with the bridal party." Kate hesitated, her lips parting to respond, but Robert entered the room before she could speak. "She'll ride with me," Robert said firmly. He was dressed in a tailored black tuxedo, his presence grounding and authoritative. Patricia's smile tightened, but she said nothing, her expression carefully neutral. The ceremony was held at the Grand St. Ignatius Cathedral, its vaulted ceilings and stained glass windows casting a kaleidoscope of colors across the marble floor. The pews were filled with Bostons alight, their whispered conversations a low hum beneath the solemn notes of the organ. Kate sat in the front row beside Robert, her hands folded neatly in her lap. She tried to focus on the beauty of the moment, the way Emily glowed as she walked down the aisle, the soft rustle of the guests turning to watch, but Patricia's presence loomed like a shadow. When the vows were exchanged, Kate couldn't help but steal a glance at Robert. His jaw was set, his gaze fixed on his daughter. For a brief moment, Kate wondered if he was thinking about Sarah and how different this day might have been had she still been alive. The reception was held in the grand ballroom of the Ritz, its opulent decor a perfect match for the Mitchell family's reputation. Crystal chandeliers cast a warm glow over the guests as they dined on filet mignon and sipped vintage champagne. Kate stood near the edge of the dance floor, watching as Emily and her new husband swayed to their first dance. She felt a pang of melancholy, wondering if she and Robert would ever share such a moment in the eyes of his family. "Beautiful, isn't it?" Patricia's voice startled Kate. Kate turned to find her mother-in-law standing beside her, a glass of champagne in hand. "It is," Kate replied cautiously. Patricia took a sip, her eyes never leaving the dance floor. Emily's marriage is a continuation of a legacy. Something worth preserving. Kate frowned, sensing the subtext in Patricia's words. Family legacies are important, she said carefully. But so is making room for new traditions. Patricia's smile was thin, almost pitying. You're ambitious, Kate. I'll give you that. But ambition doesn't always align with what's best for everyone. Before Kate could respond, Robert appeared at her side. May I have this dance? He asked, his hand extended toward her. Kate hesitated, her heart pounding. She glanced at Patricia, whose expression had hardened, and then back at Robert. I'd love to, Kate said, placing her hand in his. As they moved to the center of the dance floor, the tension between them began to dissolve. Robert pulled her closer, his voice low as he said, I know this hasn't been easy for you. Kate looked up at him, her eyes glistening. It's worth it if it means being with you. Their dance was brief but meaningful, a quiet declaration of unity in the face of opposition. When the music ended, Kate felt a renewed sense of determination. The night wore on, and as the guests began to filter out, Kate found herself alone on the terrace, the cool night air a welcome reprieve from the heat of the ballroom. Kate. She turned to see Patricia standing in the doorway, her expression unreadable. Robert's made it clear where his loyalties lie, Patricia said, stepping closer. And while I may not agree with all his choices, I can respect his commitment to you. Kate blinked, surprised by the admission. Thank you, she said cautiously. But, Patricia continued, her tone sharpening, earning my respect is one thing. Earning a place in this family is another entirely. Kate straightened, meeting Patricia's gaze head-on. I've never asked for your approval, Patricia. Only your understanding. The two women stood in silence, the weight of their unspoken words hanging between them. Finally, Patricia nodded, a hint of grudging admiration in her eyes. We'll see, she said before turning and walking back inside. Kate remained on the terrace, the city lights twinkling in the distance. For the first time in years, she felt like she had taken a step forward, not just in her marriage, but in carving out her own place in the Mitchell family. The morning after the wedding was quiet, almost too quiet, as though the entire house were holding its breath. Kate and Robert had spent the night at the Mitchell estate, a sprawling mansion nestled on the outskirts of Boston. Emily and her husband had already departed for their honeymoon in Europe, leaving behind the echoes of their grand celebration. Kate sipped her coffee slowly, seated at the edge of the veranda overlooking the estate's perfectly manicured gardens. The light breeze carried the scent of freshly cut grass, but the serenity of the moment was fleeting. Patricia's voice broke the stillness. Good morning, Kate. Kate turned to see her mother-in-law approaching, her posture regal even in a simple silk robe. Patricia carried a tea tray, her movements deliberate. Good morning, Kate replied, her tone polite but guarded. Patricia set the tray down on the table, pouring herself a cup of Earl Grey. For a few moments, they sat in silence, the tension between them almost palpable. Finally, Patricia spoke. You've made quite an impression on this family, haven't you? Kate bristled at the remark but kept her voice even. I've tried my best to support Robert and Emily. That's all I've ever wanted. Patricia set her teacup down with a soft clink. And yet, I can't help but wonder, what is it you truly want, Kate? Kate met Patricia's gaze, her own eyes steady. I want what anyone in my position would want, to feel like I belong. To build a life with Robert without feeling like I'm constantly being tested. Patricia's expression flickered, but she quickly masked it with a faint smile. The longing is earned, my dear, not given. Kate leaned forward, her voice firm. And what will it take to earn it? Jumping through hoops? Proving myself over and over again? Or is this just about you never thinking I'm good enough? The question hung in the air, heavy with unspoken truths. For once, Patricia didn't have a sharp retort. As the days passed, the tension between Kate and Patricia simmered beneath the surface. Kate tried to focus on her work, throwing herself into the planning of a charity gala that Robert had agreed to sponsor. The event was meant to support underprivileged children in Boston, a cause close to Kate's heart. "Are you sure you're ready to take this on?" Robert asked one evening as Kate sat at the dining room table, her laptop open and papers spread around her. Kate looked up, her eyes tired but determined. "I need to do this, Robert. Not just for the charity, but for myself." Robert reached for her hand, his touch reassuring. "You don't have to prove anything to anyone." But Kate wasn't so sure. She could feel Patricia's disapproval lurking in the background, waiting for her to falter. The night of the gala arrived with all the pomp and splendor one would expect from the Mitchell family name. The ballroom at the Boston Harbor Hotel was adorned with cascading floral arrangements and glittering chandeliers. Guests mingled in black tie attire, their laughter and chatter filling the air. Kate stood near the entrance, greeting attendees with a warm smile. She wore a sleek, midnight blue gown that accentuated her graceful figure, her hair styled in soft waves. "You've done well," Robert said as he approached her, a glass of champagne in hand. Kate smiled, her nerves easing slightly at his praise. But the moment was short-lived. Patricia appeared, her expression unreadable. "A beautiful event, Kate," she said, her tone almost approving. "Thank you," Kate replied cautiously. "I just hope everything goes according to plan," Patricia added, her words carrying an edge. Kate felt her stomach tighten. "It will. I've made sure of it." As the evening progressed, Kate moved between tables, ensuring that guests were comfortable and the program was running smoothly. But as she returned to her seat, she noticed Patricia engaged in a quiet but heated conversation with one of the city's most influential donors. Curiosity and dread warred within Kate. She approached cautiously, catching snippets of their conversation. "I don't see how this initiative aligns with the Mitchell legacy," Patricia was saying, her tone firm. Kate's blood ran cold. She stepped forward, interrupting. "Is there a problem?" Patricia turned to her, her smile thin and insincere. "Not at all. I was simply clarifying the scope of your project for Mr. Davenport here." Kate glanced at the donor, who looked slightly uncomfortable. "I'd be happy to answer any questions you have, Mr. Davenport," she said, her voice calm. But Patricia's interference had left its mark. By the end of the night, Kate felt the weight of every sidelong glance, every whispered conversation. She knew that Patricia had planted seeds of doubt among the donors, subtly undermining her efforts. Later that evening, back at the estate, Kate confronted Patricia. "Why?" she demanded, her voice trembling with anger. "Why would you sabotage something that means so much to me?" Patricia, seated in the drawing room with a glass of wine, looked up calmly. "I didn't sabotage anything, Kate. I simply ensured that the Mitchell name wasn't associated with anything questionable." "Questionable?" Kate repeated, incredulous. "This was about helping children, Patricia. How could that possibly be questionable?" Patricia stood, her posture rigid. "You don't understand the intricacies of this family's reputation, Kate. Every decision, every association, is scrutinized. I won't let you jeopardize what we've built." Kate's voice rose. "What you've built? or what Robert and Emily have built despite you." Patricia's eyes flashed with anger. But before she could respond, Robert entered the room. "What's going on here?" he asked, his gaze shifting between the two women. Kate turned to him, her eyes filled with frustration. "Your mother has been undermining me all night." Robert looked at Patricia, his expression hardening. "Is that true?" Patricia hesitated, her composure faltering for the first time. "I was only doing what I thought was best for the family." Robert's voice was cold. "You don't get to decide what's best for my family, Mother. Not anymore." The declaration hung in the air, a stark line drawn between them. Patricia said nothing, her jaw tightening as she turned and left the room. Kate looked at Robert, her emotions a whirlwind. "Thank you," she whispered. He pulled her into his arms, holding her tightly. "You don't have to fight this battle alone, Kate. We'll face it together." For the first time in weeks, Kate felt a glimmer of hope. But she knew that the road ahead would still be fraught with challenges, and she was ready to face them head-on. The weeks following the gala were marked by an uneasy truce. Patricia's attempts to interfere in Kate's life became more subtle, but her presence was an ever-present shadow over the Mitchell household. Kate, determined not to be intimidated, threw herself into new projects and deepened her connections in Boston's philanthropic circles. Despite Patricia's undermining, the charity gala had been a moderate success, raising a substantial amount for the Children's Initiative. However, the tension within the family lingered, and Kate began to notice something else. Whispers about the Mitchell family's past, murmurings of scandals long buried. One evening, as Kate was organizing receipts and thank-you notes from the gala, she came across an old ledger tucked into a box of archived family documents. It was weathered, the ink faded, but it bore the Mitchell name. "Kate?" Robert's voice startled her. She turned to see him leaning against the doorway, his tie loosened, his expression weary but curious. "What's that?" "I found it in the storage box from the library," she said, holding up the ledger. "It looks like an old financial record. Do you know what it's about?" Robert stepped closer, taking the book from her hands. As he flipped through the pages, his brow furrowed. "This is from my grandfather's time," he murmured. "He was known for some questionable business dealings." "Questionable?" Kate pressed. Robert hesitated, then closed the ledger. "Let's just say that not all of the family's wealth came from legitimate sources. It's ancient history now." Kate studied his face, sensing there was more to the story. "But it's still a part of your family's legacy, isn't it?" Robert sighed, setting the book down. "It is. And it's part of why my mother is so obsessed with control. She believes that if we maintain a perfect image, we can bury the past forever." Kate shook her head. "But that's not how it works, Robert. Secrets have a way of surfacing, no matter how deeply they're buried." The discovery of the ledger haunted Kate. It felt like a puzzle piece in a much larger picture, one that Patricia was determined to keep hidden. Unable to resist her curiosity, Kate began to dig deeper. She spent hours in the local archives, poring over newspaper clippings and public records. The Mitchell family had always been shrouded in prestige, but the further back she went, the more inconsistencies she uncovered. There were whispers of hostile takeovers, lawsuits quietly settled out of court, and even a mysterious disappearance linked to one of the family's early business rivals. Her research led her to an article from the 1950s about a man named Edward Larson, a former business partner of Robert's grandfather. Larson had disappeared under suspicious circumstances after accusing the Mitchell family of fraud. The details were vague, but one name kept appearing alongside Edward Larson's in the records: Patricia's father. Late one evening, Kate found Patricia alone in the library, sipping her usual glass of red wine. The room was dimly lit, the air thick with the scent of aged leather and mahogany. "May I join you?" Kate asked, her tone deceptively casual. Patricia looked up, her expression unreadable. "Of course." Kate sat down across from her, placing the old ledger on the table between them. "I found this while organizing some things. It's fascinating, really." Patricia's gaze flickered to the book, her jaw tightening. "That's ancient history. Hardly relevant now." "I disagree," Kate said, her voice calm but firm. "I think the past is very relevant, especially when it shapes the present. Don't you?" Patricia set her wine glass down, her eyes narrowing. "What are you getting at, Kate?" "I've been doing some research," Kate said, leaning forward. "About Edward Larson. About the accusations he made before he disappeared." The color drained from Patricia's face, but she quickly composed herself. "You have no idea what you're talking about." "Then explain it to me," Kate challenged. "Help me understand why his name is in this ledger, why he vanished without a trace, and why your father's name keeps appearing in connection with his." Patricia stood abruptly, her hands trembling. "You're digging into things that don't concern you, Kate. Let it go." "I can't," Kate said, standing as well. "Because this isn't just about the past, is it? It's about how far you're willing to go to protect the Mitchell name, no matter the cost." Patricia's composure cracked, her voice rising. "You think you know everything, don't you? But you don't know what it's like to carry the weight of this family. The sacrifices I've had to make." Kate stepped closer, her voice steady. "And what about the sacrifices others have made for you? Like Edward Larson? Did he deserve to disappear so your family could keep its secrets?" Patricia's eyes filled with a mixture of anger and fear, but she said nothing. The silence between them was deafening, heavy with unspoken truths. Later that night, Kate confided in Robert, sharing everything she had uncovered. "I had no idea," he said, his voice filled with disbelief. "I knew my grandfather wasn't a saint, but this is something else entirely." "What are we going to do?" Kate asked. Robert took her hand, his grip firm. "We'll find the truth, no matter what it takes. And if there's a way to make things right, we'll do it. Together." For the first time, Kate felt like she wasn't alone in her quest for answers, but she also knew that the journey ahead would be dangerous, unraveling a web of lies that had been carefully woven for generations. Kate and Robert spent the next few weeks piecing together the truth. The deeper they delved, the clearer it became that Edward Larson's disappearance wasn't just a footnote in the Mitchell family history, it was a pivotal event. Patricia's father had orchestrated a scheme to frame Larson for embezzlement, forcing him into hiding. But Larson hadn't simply disappeared. He had tried to fight back, and in doing so, he had paid the ultimate price. The key to the mystery lay in the ledger. Hidden within its faded pages, Kate found coded entries, payments made to an untraceable account just days before Larson's disappearance. With Robert's help, she decrypted the records, which revealed a payoff to a man named Howard Grayson. Through relentless research and a few discreet inquiries, they discovered that Howard Grayson was still alive, living under an assumed identity in a small town in Maine. He had been a young security guard at the Mitchell family's Boston estate at the time of Larson's disappearance. Kate and Robert made the journey to Maine, their emotions a mix of trepidation and determination. They found Grayson living in a modest cabin on the edge of a dense forest. When they introduced themselves, Grayson's initial reaction was one of fear. But when Robert assured him they weren't there to harm him, the old man reluctantly agreed to talk. "I was just a kid back then," Grayson said, his voice hoarse. "I didn't understand what I was getting into." He revealed that he had been coerced by Patricia's father to help dispose of evidence tying the Mitchell family to Larson. Grayson didn't know the full details, but he confirmed that Larson had confronted Patricia's father, threatening to expose him. Hours later, Larson was gone, and Grayson was tasked with destroying documents and cleaning up the aftermath. "I've lived with this guilt my whole life," Grayson confessed, tears streaming down his face. "I wanted to come forward, but I was terrified. The Mitchells, they're powerful people." Armed with this new information, Kate and Robert returned to Boston. They confronted Patricia once more, this time in front of the entire family. "You spent your life protecting a lie," Robert said, his voice trembling with emotion. "And for what? To preserve an image that's built on the suffering of others." Patricia tried to deny the accusations, but the evidence was overwhelming. When faced with the ledger, Grayson's testimony, and the coded records, she broke down. "You don't understand," she said, her voice cracking. "I did what I had to do to protect this family. Everything I've done has been for you, for all of us." "By burying the truth?" Kate asked, her voice filled with quiet fury. "By destroying lives?" Patricia's silence was answer enough. The fallout from the revelations was swift and far-reaching. Kate and Robert made the difficult decision to go public with the truth, working with a journalist to expose the Mitchell family's dark history. It wasn't an easy choice, but they both knew it was the only way to make amends. The story rocked Boston's elite, and the Mitchell family's reputation took a major hit. But for the first time, Kate and Robert felt free. The burden of the family's secrets was no longer theirs to carry. They used the attention to redirect the family's resources toward meaningful causes, creating a foundation dedicated to transparency and justice. The foundation became a symbol of their commitment to building a better future, not just for their family, but for the community as a whole. One afternoon, as the dust began to settle, Kate visited Patricia in the library. The once proud matriarch was a shadow of her former self, her icy composure shattered. "Why are you here?" Patricia asked, her tone devoid of its usual sharpness. "To tell you that it's over," Kate said. "The lies, the manipulation, it all ends here." Patricia looked away, her eyes filled with a mix of regret and bitterness. "You think you've won, don't you?" "This was never about winning," Kate said. "It was about doing the right thing." Patricia didn't respond, and Kate realized there was nothing left to say. She walked out of the library, leaving Patricia alone with her thoughts and her guilt. Months later, life had taken on a new rhythm for Kate and Robert. The foundation was thriving, and their marriage was stronger than ever. One evening, as they sat on the porch of their home, watching the sunset, Robert took Kate's hand. "Thank you," he said softly. "For what?" Kate asked, leaning her head on his shoulder. "For helping me see the truth," he said. "And for helping me believe that we could build something better." Kate smiled, her heart full. "We did it together, and we're just getting started." As the sun dipped below the horizon, casting the sky in hues of gold and crimson, Kate and Robert felt a sense of peace they hadn't known before. They had faced the shadows of the past and come out stronger on the other side. Their story wasn't just about uncovering the truth. It was about finding the courage to rewrite their legacy.